Welcome to Growing a B2B SaaS. On this show, you'll get actionable and usable advice. You'll hear about all aspects of growing a business to a business software company. Customer success, sales, funding, bootstrapping, exits, scaling, everything you need to know about growing a startup, and you'll get it from someone who's going through the same journey. Now your host, Joran Hoffman.
Welcome back to another episode on the Grow Your B2B SaaS podcast. Our goal with this podcast is to help you grow your B2B SaaS. When you want to grow your SaaS, you will need to do prospecting in some way. This can mean many different things, and you can do it in many different ways. We're going to talk today about how to do sales prospecting right. My guest is Rob Harlow. Rob is the co-founder and CINO, Chief Innovation Officer at Outbase, and he calls himself a natural geek. He sold his first website on the age of 12, has coded over 20 years and in 30 different coding languages. When you combine his technical skills with his business leadership experience, it allows him to build technology which solves problems, reduce cost, and improves performance. With his company Outbase, they have access to data, a lot of data. With data from 49.5 million emails, insights of over 350 sales and marketing professionals, they are able to gain a lot of insights. He's able to tell us what works and what doesn't in sales prospecting. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Rob.
Thanks, Ryan. Great to be here.
If people are not convinced about that intro about you, why should people listen to you today, Rob?
Good question. I think I'll probably focus on what we've done here at Outbase, and really Outbase is part of the SoPro group, which was a company set up back in 2015, really just specialize in social prospecting, primarily email prospecting. Since then, using SoPro as one of our primary market channels, we've doubled in size year on year, and I've worked with over 3,000 clients, 65 different industries and 70 different countries, engaging with over 20 million prospects across those countries, and really working hard to establish ourselves at the forefront of prospecting in the UK. Most recently, we started publishing an annual report called The State of Prospecting, which at lines, I think, has started to be used as the benchmark for prospecting results and optimization across the entire industry.
I actually read the report, and I do have some questions regarding that coming up in this podcast. But let's start with the real basics. What does prospecting mean to you? Can you explain prospecting in your own words?
It's a good question, because it's often seen as something that's quite new, but really prospecting has been around for as long as sales. In its simplest form, it's just finding the right person in the right company that your product or service can solve a pain point for, and reaching out to them, contacting them. Over the years, the approach to achieving this has become way more sophisticated, but at its core, it's a process that every salesperson ever has done and would really come naturally, and they would gravitate towards. I guess today, prospecting is much more digital, and that gives the opportunity to take advantage of way more data points. We can build far more efficient and automated processes, and really email sits at the heart of this. But there's probably three core parts to any prospecting process, which is research. You need to know the pain points that your product or service solves. And the next step is to figure out who it solves those for. If you take Register, for example, it's a great platform for managing partnerships. It addresses actually quite different challenges for someone that's totally new to the world of B2B partnerships versus someone that's been in the world for a while. They've got a spreadsheet full of partners and they need help managing them. Actually, you can't approach those two people in the same way. And so it's essential during your research phase to identify those different people. Then it's identify. You actually need the types of people you want to talk to and the types of companies. And the next step is to find them. There's loads and loads of places to do this. LinkedIn is a great start. And then there's a number of specialist data aggregators, which can really help move beyond demographic filters. Back to the Register example, you might want to find people in specific industries, but maybe they're using competitor products or showing other signs of needing a partnership program. And really the prospecting part, the contacting, or what we call engage, is the final step. And in some ways, the easier one. Once you've done your research and identification properly, then reaching out with the right message should yield some pretty strong results.
Nice. So summarize that: research, identify, and then prospecting. And I think you mentioned it already. You need to know the pain points. You need to know who to reach out. I think this is the common red line in all the podcasts we've been recording so far. You need to know your ideal customer profile, your ICP, and what you're actually trying to solve with your product.
Absolutely. And I think the more detailed you can get with that, the better. One of the real common mistakes we see time and time again is trying to go out with one message to everybody or a really general message to groups of ICPs. Whereas in reality, you've got to be super specific because you only get that first sentence for someone to read and resonate with. Otherwise, they just ignore the email.
I'm going to ask one more question regarding the basis, because you now have, of course, product-led growth, customer-led growth. Why should B2B SaaS companies actually need to care about doing sales prospecting?
So, I mean, all of these things, product-led growth or inbound marketing is great. And we run plenty here. We try and maximize all marketing channels. However, in reality, not all of your prospective customers are going to come looking for you. If you're really going to scale sales and marketing, particularly at the start, you're going to need to effectively deploy an outbound strategy. And again, it's not something that's new. The difference now is just that if you roll back 7 years, sales rep will be doing this process manually. They'll be spending a lot of time on it. They'll be making phone calls, manually sending emails. Give or take, spending 60% of their time prospecting to spend 40% pitching. Whereas the ability to have it in a much more automated fashion these days should really put it at the heart of your sales process.
I think it makes sense, right? Because you can't sometimes start with another growth channel if you actually have your first client. So you will need to indeed, if you want to scale, you need to deploy some kind of outbound strategy to at least get the first clients in. And if that works, you can scale it.
Absolutely. I'd never really recommend it being your sole channel, but in terms of talking to customers, getting feedback and bringing those first few customers on, it's undoubtedly going to be the cheapest route to market.
We're going to talk about prospecting, of course, how to do it right. You already kind of mentioned it. Like, I wanted to ask, when do you start with prospecting? But you mentioned like you need to do the research, you need to identify, and then you can start with prospecting. Let's dive a little bit in research and identify. What needs to be in place before you really can start prospecting?
In some ways, the prospecting is the easy part. And the key is managing the leads as they come in. And effective prospecting campaign will run over a number of weeks, potentially even a number of months. There's an exponential increase in the number of leads and the number of responses and the number of potential clients that you're going to be talking to. And so that can get surprisingly busy, surprisingly quickly. And managing those leads and those customers and conversations properly is essential. So some of the things that need to be in place before kicking off prospecting are CRMs. A surprising number of people we work with don't have a CRM, and a free HubSpot account can be life-changing. It's fantastic and really does everything that's needed. Sales process, documented sales process is again really important because those first few leads come in, it's nice, you have some good conversations and it's easy. You roll that forward 4 weeks, but all of a sudden you're preparing service orders and proposals for those first few customers and new pitches are coming in. It gets a lot more complex, and having a written down sales process to refer to, that really helps. There's some real core steps that you need to take advantage of a prospecting campaign. They're every single response. If you're sending 100 emails, you're getting 10% people responding. That's 10 every single day. And all of a sudden, over the course of a week, you spend a lot of time replying to people. And so having that written down process as to how to do that and tracked in the CRM is what will actually make your prospecting campaign thrive.
This goes back also one of the other podcasts we had where we talked about the sales-led approach, or creating like a sales process, as in you need to create demand instead of trying to sell things. So even with the message you're going to send out, you need to sell, of course, the value. So what kind of things you're trying to solve, the pain points you're trying to solve, and who do you need to reach out to is really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mentioned it in the intro. You mentioned it afterwards. You guys have a lot of data. You mentioned it. You wrote a white paper, The State of Prospecting 2023. There's a lot of insights in that paper. We're going to share it, of course, in the show notes, but let's talk about a couple of things which are in there. What are the most common mistakes you see companies make while prospecting?
I'll probably split these into two categories. The first one is technical setup. Actually, with the world of email, it's always been busy. It's getting busier. And if you don't have the right technical setup, then any prospecting campaign is doomed from day one. And it can get quite advanced. You need to be sending from email accounts with good reputation on a domain with good reputation. There's lots of fairly complex DNS authentication processes, DKIM, SPF, DMARC, that need to be set up. And if any of these are not set up correctly, then getting your email into the inbox is just not going to happen. Similarly, the actual content of the email from a technical point of view just needs to not look like a marketing email. We're not talking HTML, shiny graphics here. We're talking one-to-one emails that you would send to a person. This, I think, there's often a tendency to overcomplicate this and write an all singing, all dancing email rather than actually just a conversational approach, exactly as you would if you were meeting someone for the first time. But yes, and most of those technical are really sort of tick boxes. Actually, if you get them wrong, they can completely kibosh a campaign. But again, you get them right, those boxes are ticked. And everything from that point comes down to harping on about pain points, but very much onto that messaging around the pain points. And having too broad a targeting is really the number one cause of campaigns just not working. There's so many filters that can be used. There would be talking to different industries in different ways, different company sizes, different people within different company sizes, even drilling down to how you would talk to different job titles in different companies. For example, a marketing manager in a company that's under 10 employees is quite likely to be a senior decision maker. Whereas in a company of 500 employees, a marketing manager may well not be anywhere near as senior. But not treating those two demographic points in the same way, you're going to get messaging that doesn't resonate with one or both of them.
All comes down again to your ICP, so definitely set that up correctly. I do have one question also regarding the technical setup. Like you mentioned, it needs to be correct. Do you recommend companies to use their own domain for prospecting?
Generally, no. I mean, it's totally possible to use our own domain. We use our own domain. However, one of the key things is natural looking email volumes. So if you're a small company and you're receiving 10 emails a day, it doesn't look that natural to be sending 50 emails outbound. Whereas we have 300 people here now and a huge amount of email activity going on. So sending some outbound email actually looks totally natural. At the same time, we'd recommend just as a best practice to use a separate domain for any marketing activity, specifically prospecting. There's no difference to that with email accounts for each sales agent set up. It's not a case of sending huge amounts. It's about sending what is a natural amount of emails, ramping those up carefully so that the domain gets warmed up properly and just monitoring it really closely over time.
I think that's really important. As you mentioned, inbox deliverability is the most important thing, of course. Like you can send a lot of emails, but if it doesn't land in inbox, then it's no use. We experienced it ourselves. We had a month where I think we sent 80,000 emails. We did purchase like new domains. We set up everything up technically, but if the domain isn't warmed up properly, it will hit spam pretty quickly. You can buy a new domain again and do the exact same thing, but it's a bit of a hassle. So doing it right and building things up, as you said, is probably the better way to go here.
Yeah. Ever since day one, worked really hard to try and establish benchmarks, both internally and externally, because that's your first indicator that something's not right. And as a rule of thumb, if you're sending emails and you're not getting, say, an 8% response rate, and of those, maybe between 30 and 40% of those are not positive, something's wrong. Doesn't necessarily mean it's your technical setup, but again, it could be the messaging, it could be the targeting. But where the tendency is always to just look at the results and go, what would happen if I sent 100 times more email? Will I get 100 times more results? Is rarely the answer. It's always the case of then going, no, let's figure out how we get to those benchmarks, because as you've experienced, you just burn through domains and email accounts for very low results.
Exactly. We're going to keep talking about the report you guys have built. What are the top key findings from the report from the State of Prospecting 2023?
I think probably one of the really interesting ones that we're obviously convinced of is always worth highlighting is email is still the most performant marketing channel across B2B marketing. I've lost track of how many email is dead posts I see on LinkedIn or Twitter, and it seems there'll be a flurry of these every single year, dating back for the last 15 years. I think when Gmail first came out was the first time I started to notice these, and it's just not the case. Email is the most performant channel, and it's one that not only marketers want to be using, but also prefer to receive information on. And that's just consistently affirmed by every single questionnaire we do with obviously clients and non-clients. Probably another really important one, which is I guess changing over time is there's an increasing amount of noise, as with any marketing channel. Something that's new 7 years ago is no longer new now. And there is an increasing amount of noise. People are getting an increasing number of emails, and it's so much more important to be accurate and relevant. You can get into the inbox. However, the attention span of the recipient it's nothing like it used to be 3 or 4 years ago. And if you don't capture someone's imagination within that first sentence, that's it. You've gone either into the bin, best case, or into the spam, worst case. And there's almost kind of attraction to one of the other points around personalization, where personalization is always something we've really focused on. And a very consistent stat that comes out is the performance versus number of personalization points in an email. And I always find this a really interesting one personally, because it's easy to assume that more personalization equaled better. And it's just not the case. And actually, beyond 3 to 4 points of personalization, we actually see a decrease in performance. And when you actually work through the raw data, it's really clear that it's very difficult to naturally personalize an email beyond 3 to 4 points. I'm sure you've all seen ones where it's like, "Hi, Joran, in your job as founder and CEO at Redis." And it's just shoehorning in that job title in a way that no one would actually write it to you. And really understanding personalization is key. Personalization isn't about getting data points pasted into an email. It's about going, right, you're in a senior role, you're likely very busy. I'm going to give you 2 slots in 3 to 4 working days. And those time slots being personalized. It's about, again, understanding your pain point and your industry. It's really just about making things conversational and genuinely personalized to you rather than the data that we know about you. One other thing I would pull out, which we mentioned in the report, but it's absolutely going to be a feature. It has been in our internal benchmarking for the last more than a year. And moving forward is the subset of open rates. Open rates are an almost redundant metric these days. With the advent of Apple privacy and of sort of third-party image blocking, Gmail web client being another example of this, open rates are sort of at best misleading, or at worst, just not a metric worth looking at. We see lots and lots of people report open rates of 75% or 80%, and it's just not the case. And the benchmarks to focus on really, really always are that response rate. Or, we can see that in the correlation between response rate and open rate. But the key takeaway there is just open rates are no longer a metric of much value in any outbound prospecting.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine, because if indeed the emails are automatically being opened by Apple or not being shown that they're being opened, then it doesn't make sense to start reporting on that anymore.
Exactly.
The first point you mentioned, email is still the most performant marketing channel. I guess, what do you mean with performing? Are you, for example, looking at like customer acquisition cost or the amount of leads you're able to generate? You mentioned people will still want to be contacted via email. I guess, like, what do you define? How is it best performing still?
In every way, we've managed to measure it. And there are 3 specific ways that we've looked at. One is survey-based. What is the channel you would most likely to be contacted on? Email always performs very strongly. But the core ones around performance are cost per lead, cost per acquisition. Cost per lead is something that we survey across our clients and also across some non-clients as well to try and get a balance. And email cost per lead consistently comes out around 40% of the cost of a paid search lead, for example. When we talk about a lead here, we try and make this a sales qualified lead rather than a marketing qualified lead. So effectively, a sort of cost per pitch is the right analogy. But consistently performs the best. Cost per acquisition, we do have a slightly smaller data set because there's sometimes sensitive information that goes in clients releasing that. However, because we have a very broad range of clients, that we've got several hundred active clients at any given time, again, it's something we track quite closely with them. We have web plugins that go on their site, and they're very open with their overall cost per acquisition across channels and how email stacks up to that.
Yeah, and I can imagine the conversion rates might be higher just because you already had a conversation before you're going to talk with them, because you had that conversation over email, and then you might set up the follow-up meeting. So they're a bit more, how do you say it, engaged with you already before taking the call.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's often quite a bit more information that we know, because even though it's 2 or 3 emails back and forward, there are subtle bits of information which set that call up. meaning that, and all good salespeople will flex for this, but the way you would talk to someone who has initially been the recipient of a prospecting email and had a couple of emails back and forward is very different to someone who's just come along, thought this looks interesting and filled out a demo form on the site and potentially has slightly less information about what you do, but a different type of intent.
Yeah, exactly. Well, taking these key findings in mind, like, are there any strategies, processes you can share with our listeners today, which they can use to do prospecting right?
I'm going to sound like a broken record, but start by identifying the right customers. And the reason we really labor on this point is that go back a few years, LinkedIn was the one place that everyone would go and be like, right, I want to contact CEOs, founders in this industry, in these companies, in these countries. Great. That's my campaign. And over time, not only has the ICP become more sophisticated, but the number of data points available have become more sophisticated. It could be based on technologies that a company uses to build their systems. We've had campaigns with companies specializing in COBOL and Fortran and old programming technologies, and you're trying to identify companies that use those. It's not something you'd find on LinkedIn. Similarly, it might be companies that use particular types of CRM. If your product is a Salesforce plugin, you don't want to be trying to promote the services to non-Salesforce customers, for example. There's a whole raft of other sort of intent-based data. We identify things like companies that be in the news, whether if someone has won an award, great. It feels way more natural to mention that award in the email rather than not. And then there's what we call sort of firmographic intent, where you can identify companies who are at slightly different stages in their life cycle by what's going on at the company. If someone's just recruited a senior CMO or another senior marketing person, or is growing their marketing department, then actually they're quite likely to be looking at changing vendors or new agencies or increasing spend on marketing channels. And tailoring the messaging around that really helps with being relevant. And I think really the second part of that is personalization. It's an interesting time for personalization. GPT, it has changed the game, but I think there's too much irresponsible usage of it. And I mean, I saw you do it. I receive emails every day where my LinkedIn headline has definitely been fed into a GPT prompt. And the intro to an email it's just unnatural. It's talk about almost like the intro to this. I know, as a natural geek, who can write into it, and it's just not the way. So it is personalized and it is unique for each person, but it's just not the way that you would actually talk to someone. And so I guess that my takeaway from that would be really focus on personalization. Treat it with caution, because that sort of uncanny valley feeling when someone receives an email and it doesn't look quite right is a really low bar. And another non-GPT is company name. The Sopro company name on LinkedIn is Sopro-social prospecting. And if someone uses that in an email, that's it, they've gone. It's just instantly obvious that it's been written by a machine versus if they say Sopro. So yeah, it's never about more personalization. It's about really taking the time to go through your data, make sure your data is accurate and looks natural.
Because otherwise all the effort you did before is basically going to be useless.
Totally.
And maybe to summarize what you've said, identifying the right customers to begin with, know their pain points, then of course find the right leads. So you can use technology to find the right leads. Competitor users, maybe relevant tools, which they can use in conjunction with your tool. Use intent data, use firmographic data, set up things properly, technically. So make sure that you actually hit in the inbox, be relevant. So make sure your messaging is going to relate to their pain points. And then personalize, but don't overdo it. Don't give it fully to the AI. Treat it with caution. I think that is a bit the summary of what you've been saying.
That's probably better than I put it myself. Yeah.
Growing a B2B SaaS is tough. We know. This is why we started Redditus. We help you to grow your monthly recurring revenue without high upfront costs. How? By leveraging someone else's network and only giving away a commission when they deliver you a paid client. It's called affiliate marketing. It's already a really cost-effective and scalable revenue channel. We even made it better for you. With Redditus, you can start for free and only start paying us when you generate revenue. Learn more at www.getredditus.com.
How would you look into the future of prospecting? How would you see, like, what is going to change? How do you see the future of prospecting?
I think there's two ways of looking at this. One is the technical, and humans and inboxes will just get better at filtering. So for all the reasons we spoke about, it's going to make it even more important to get technical setup right. It'll be even easier to destroy the reputation of a domain and more difficult to repair the damage done. Already, as you can imagine, we see lots and lots of cases where campaigns start off just not performing well, and it's because of previous damage that's been done to a domain. And it takes a lot of work to recover that. And I think as automated spam filters become better, AI spam is filtering out AI emails. And again, humans are just naturally looking, identifying this. The technical side of it will get harder. So make the message count. Relevancy is key. Where the real future of prospecting lies is looking at it as a multi-channel approach. And quite often prospecting is looked at as a series of emails, or sometimes there's a LinkedIn Connect thrown in there. But ultimately, a fairly short-lived campaign, something that might take, let's say, send one email a week for 4 weeks. In a month, that's it. And if the person you are contacting isn't interested in your solution in that month, they're potentially out of the campaign. And actually, the best possible way to be managing prospecting is to go beyond messaging. It might not be the right time for a number of reasons for that particular prospect, but if they are the right fit, then chances are it will be the right time at some point. So remaining top of mind and layering in intent data on top of your prospecting campaign is key. You might send those 3 or 4 initial introductory emails, but you don't want to keep hassling someone who hasn't replied. However, their company is growing, or they are in the news for an award win, or they're in the news for an acquisition or funding. What a great reason to reach out, and automating those triggers is key. I mentioned about thermographic intent signals, another really good reason to contact someone, whether it's congratulate them or just mention you've noticed this. And first-party intent data is essential as well. And what I mean by that is activity on your own website. There's a huge amount of traffic from people who they might click on the email, have a look, and for whatever reason, they decide they don't want to talk to you right now. And that's okay. It could be for any number of reasons, but knowing that they click is important. And knowing if someone comes back in 2 months' time is even more important, because it gives a really good reason to reach out. IP tracking is a really important technology because, again, often what we'll see within all large companies, there's very rarely one person involved in a B2B buying process. And actually that one email might get sent out to multiple different people who come and visit the website, and being able to attribute those website visits to the company that's being prospected, again, is essential in getting an overall view on the level of interest in the product that you're offering, and being able to follow up at the right time.
I think that's key, right? You don't have one person making the decision often to buy your tool. So figuring out which company actually visited your site and then see how they came to your site is going to be crucial. So you can create like a timeline and see exactly what have they been doing until they actually started to reach out to you, for example, because they don't always respond to the email, but you can see exactly what have they been doing with the first party data you already have, or the first party intent data, as you call it.
Exactly. And it's really just part of that becoming where it's much more about quality rather than quantity. It's rarely about ramping up the number of emails you're sending. It's about nailing down who the right people you are that genuinely you solve problems for, and tracking them along the process. So you can use a platform like Outbase, but there are other platforms that will do that. But it's what you do next that will really dictate the success of the prospecting campaign.
And I think what you mentioned at the beginning, having a multi-channel, you can definitely go just beyond messaging, right? You need to send them just a LinkedIn connection, which probably isn't enough, but you can also start creating like custom audiences within ad platforms where you can actually bring your messaging also to them. So even though it might not be relevant when you email them, you could still show your brand along the way, and they might think like, hey, I actually received an email a while back, I'm going to respond, or they don't respond to the email, but they will get in contact with you via any other route. So multi-channel.
So, and there's an example of that. Two things we have in what we call internal beta. As you can imagine, our sales team are our best clients, and any new features or new approaches we test on them first. And it's what we call our internal beta stage. And some of the things that we're doing there is direct mail. Actually, genuinely sending someone a letter or a promotion has a surprisingly good result. You mentioned it yourself about the display ads, and we integrate a number of different display networks, whether they're both social and sort of more typical display networks, to show different ads to different audiences, and also different audiences at different stages. We're currently experimenting, testing, showing a particular ad to someone who's had a proposal sent to them to try and improve close rates. And gifting is the final thing we're testing, where actually offering someone a free cup of coffee or a free lunch to enjoy whilst you have a meeting has a really positive impact on response rates. And actually, sort of even beyond the response rates, seems to be engendering a totally different type of conversation. There's a much more positive approach to someone who's sitting there with their free coffee when they meet you, and it has a really noticeable impact on the close rates. So all of these things are, I think, that we expect to be building into the platform in the very near future.
And I think you're using some kind of psychology here as well, because if you're going to give something free at the beginning, you're already creating some kind of win or not a win. It's more as in you're giving something away where they're more likely to have that conversation with you, and they go in with a different mindset. Absolutely. When you don't.
But I think the law of reciprocity.
Exactly. We are coming to the end. I always like to ask these two questions. Basically, what kind of advice you would give in a certain stage. So when we talk about prospecting, what kind of advice would you give SaaS founders when they want to grow to 10K monthly recurring revenue?
For anyone at that kind of size, I would suggest do sales yourself. It's so important at that stage to be talking to customers, getting the feedback, getting the reasons they want to buy, the reasons they don't want to buy, and using that to not only inform your sales process, which is essential, but also just to inform your product strategy. Because you can guarantee that 90% of what you think your customers want, actually they don't. And there are probably 2 or 3 features that you'll get that feedback from customers that would make them buy. And it's, for me, it's one of the best ways to do it. The other reason for suggesting that at this sort of stage is ultimately cash is important. And at that very early stage, it's so much more important to prove your concept and make sure you can get beyond 10K MRR. If you can't, then you've probably got a product market fit challenge rather than a sales one.
Yeah, and I think it's going to help also with the next question I'm going to ask, where you want to scale things up. By talking to the clients yourself, doing sales yourself, you will be identifying the right customers, knowing their pain points, so you can start scaling things in the next phase. Which is, what kind of advice would you give somebody who's growing past that 10K monthly recurring revenue towards 1 million annual recurring revenue?
Well, I mean, and at this point, obviously everything is totally different. And we work with a number of early stage companies, and as they start to build towards 1 million ARR, then really the founder or the CEO's main role is to make themselves redundant from every process. Sales is no different. So the most important part there is to have a repeatable sales process, something that can be documented, taught to your sales team, ideally to a head of sales who is then managing your sales team. So ultimately you're the recipient of the results as opposed to the person driving it. Equally, predictability in sales is essential as well. As you start to reach those higher ARR levels, churn naturally becomes a bigger challenge, because as a percentage, the number of people churning, and you need to know that you're predictably bringing enough customers in every single month that you can grow the sales team, grow that number, and that you're not going to plateau your overall growth.
I think that's going to be really good. Forecasting is going to be really important, especially if you have investors, then you need to do it properly. Any final thoughts you want to share with other B2B SaaS founders?
The value of talking to your clients, but also forming strong partnerships is essential. We, as part of the Sopro Group, so completely outside of Outbase, we invest in a number of tech startups, and there's a lot of factors for failure, a lot of factors for success. But one constant in all of those success factors is repeatable sales and really strong partnerships as well that just set you up along the way.
Final question. If people want to get in contact with you, Rob, what would be the best way to do so?
My email is always wide open. As someone who works in email, it would be crazy not to be. which is rob@sopro.io. But yeah, I try and stay fairly active on LinkedIn. So it's a social network, that would be the one. I'm always keen to have conversations with new people.
Nice. Thank you really much for coming. We'll definitely make or share all the links related to what we discussed today. So about the white paper, about your LinkedIn profile. And of course, I won't add your email in there, but people can find it now by in the transcript. Thanks again for coming on the show, Rob, and sharing your knowledge today.
No worries. Thanks for the invite.
No worries.
See you later.
You've been listening to Growing a B2B SaaS. Joran has been a head of customer success before founding his own startup. He's experiencing the same journey you are. We hope you've gotten some actionable advice from the show, and we hope you had fun along the way. We know we did. Make sure to like, rate, and review the podcast in the meantime. To find out more and to hook up with us on our social media sites, go to www.getredditous.com. See you next time on Growing a B2B SaaS.